Welcome back, Seeds. So, last week I shared one of the most humbling moments of my life. Yeah, the day I heard myself say to my friend, my adult friend, my friend who's a little bit older than me, why can't you just do what I tell you to do? Well, how many of us know that it wasn't really about my friend? Mm-mm. No, no, it wasn't. It was about me. I became aware. You see, it was the day I realized I had been carrying a responsibility the divine never asked me to carry. Never. Help? Yes. Carry? No. And with that awareness came an understanding and an overstanding of a need for change. And that's what I want to talk about today, moving from awareness to healing. And that required change, which was a requirement for me to take action. And if this is you, then today I want to help you put that burden down because loving people doesn't require carrying them. In fact, sometimes carrying people actually keeps them stagnant, keep them from growing. So, welcome to today's episode of Watering the Seed, where we grow through what we go through. I'm your coach, D. Jackson, and today we'll explore the difference between helping and rescuing, why people cling to familiar identities, why advice only works when there's ownership, and how to establish healthy boundaries without carrying guilt. And then lastly, how to love deeply while trusting the divine with the outcome. This episode isn't about loving people less. No, no. It's about loving them in a healthier way, a way that may feel a little uncomfortable at first, but ultimately it becomes a better way for all. Okay, so come on in and get nice and comfy and let's talk about it. Now, for those of you who are visiting us for the first time, I'm really excited to have you join us today. Really excited. And I want you to know that your presence means more to me than you could ever imagine. Over here, we're on a journey to living a better way. And I'm really thankful that you decided today to be a part of that, to be a part of the journey. Now, let's talk about it. Helping people versus rescuing them. There is a difference. There's a difference in that. Helping says, I'll walk beside you, right? Rescuing says, I'll walk for you. Helping empowers people. Rescuing, well, that enables them. Helping teaches. Rescuing, it removes the responsibility. Helping develops confidence. Rescuing, well, it develops a dependency. Think about it. Think about a parent teaching a child to maybe ride a bicycle. At first, you hold the seat, right? Then you let go. Why do you let go? Because your goal was never to ride the bike for them. No, your goal was always to help them ride the bike themselves, right? But somewhere along the way, many of us keep holding the seat long after we should, long after they should be pedaling on their own. Let's go to scripture. Let's go to Galatians chapter 6, verse 5. It says, For each one should carry their own load. Now, notice, this was written by an apostle named Paul, if you're not familiar. Paul in here, he didn't say we shouldn't love one another. He simply reminded us that everyone has a responsibility, that only they can carry. Now, understand something. This is not permission to stop helping others. He's not telling us to stop helping others. That's not what Paul is saying at all. In fact, there's something actually beautiful here. Because just 3 verses earlier, Paul actually wrote, Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Then he goes on to say in verse 5, for each one should carry their own load. Now, at first glance, it sounds like a contradiction, right? It absolutely does. And that's the way I read it as well. So you're not in that on your own, but further review and further investigation afforded me a different understanding and overstanding of the scriptures. So there is a distinction. Okay, there is a distinction. What he's teaching us is the difference between a burden and a responsibility. There's a difference between those two things. A burden is something that temporarily overwhelms a person, right? A responsibility is something that the divine has assigned to a person, your assignment. Okay, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. If my friend loses a loved one, and that did happen, that's a burden for the friend, okay? I should comfort my friend, and I did. I should pray with them and for them, make sure that they are okay, make sure they eat, make sure they have transportation if they have none of their own, or if they don't feel comfortable enough to drive safely, then make sure that they have transportation. Sit with them if they need company. If they want to talk or if they just want to cry, just be present. Help them carry that burden. But if my friend refuses to manage or steward their finances appropriately, now that's something quite different, right? That's a responsibility. And if they continue to make unhealthy choices with their finances, right? Or refuses to take ownership of their own life, those aren't burdens. Those are considered responsibilities. And if I continually carry responsibilities that belong to my friend or someone else, I actually prevent them from growing, from learning, okay, from becoming responsible and being and holding themselves accountable for their own life, their own decisions. Think about it. If I carry your backpack, right? If I carry your backpack every day, then your muscles never get stronger. If I take your test, you never learn the lesson. If I make every difficult decision for you, you never develop wisdom or the knowledge to make better decisions, guided decisions. Sometimes what looks like love seeds is actually interference. Yeah, it's interference, interference with the divine creator's process. Okay? The divine never intended us to become permanent carriers of other people's responsibilities. He called us to be companions, not replacements, right? Companions, not replacements. I remember, when my sons were young boys, maybe around 14 years old or so. And I had a chore calendar where they had to rotate their chores on a weekly basis, take out the trash, do the dishes, and cut the lawn. Well, one of them hated to do dishes. And so he would ask one of his brothers to do dishes. And his brother would say to him, I love you, bruh, but if you want me to do it, you got to pay me. And me, with my loving, compassionate self, was a little disturbed about that, right? About him charging his brother because that's his brother. Why would you charge your brother for your help instead of exchanging his assistance for something that you wanted him to do? Like switching chores. But anyway, none of my business. They worked it out. Here's the thing. My son was wise beyond his years. I hope he's not listening. Because he understood that his brother was given a responsibility. And because his brother didn't want to fulfill that responsibility, not because he was physically or mentally unable to do it, okay? Not because he couldn't, it wasn't a burden. It was because he simply didn't want to do it. So he, in his wisdom, my son, in his wisdom, required his irresponsible brother to pay him. And if he didn't want to pay for the service, then he better do it himself, right? So either way, he would take care of his responsibility, whether it was paying or whether it was doing it himself. He had some responsibility in making sure that that job got done or that chore got done. I think this is where so many of us get exhausted, right? Us doers, us helpers. I think this is where we get exhausted. We confuse compassion, like I did, with responsibility. We believe loving someone means carrying what the divine creator assigned to them. And before long, our backs hurt, we have headaches, our spirits grow weary, our peace disappears because we're trying to carry backpacks with someone else's name on it, right? Think about it this way. Let's say let's say we're in an airport. Okay. We're at an airport. And in an airport, everybody has luggage, right? You have luggage, everybody has luggage because we're traveling. Now imagine walking through the terminal. And for those of you who had not ever been to an airport, just imagine going to school and everybody has a backpack. But for those that have been in airports, imagine walking through the airport terminal and deciding to pick up everyone else's suitcase because they look tired. Oh, you look tired. Let me carry that suitcase for you. Oh, you look tired. Let me grab your backpack. Now, at first, people might appreciate your help, right? Follow me. They may appreciate your help. And that makes you feel good because they appreciate you. But eventually, you're dragging 5, 6, 10 suitcases or backpacks, and you can barely pull your own, okay? Pull your own weight. Now, whose trip just became impossible? Mm-hmm. Yours. And that's exactly what happens emotionally when we try to carry everybody's stuff. So today I want to ask you a question. Are you carrying someone's burden or are you carrying someone's responsibility? Because remember, there is a difference between a burden and a responsibility. One fulfills the law of the divine, bearing someone's burden with them, remember? And the other quietly steals your peace, taking on someone's responsibility. And that is the difference. That's the difference between a burden and a responsibility. We spend so much time carrying other people's responsibilities that we never reach the destination that the divine intended for us to reach. And neither do they. Neither do they. Okay? And this one changed my life. That changed my life. Because people don't always resist change, right? People don't always resist change. Sometimes they protect familiarity. Yeah, think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Even if familiar is painful, it's predictable, right? It's a comfort zone. Some people would rather live in a familiar struggle, right, than an unfamiliar freedom. Yeah, yeah. They would rather live in struggle than to feel free because free is unfamiliar. The struggle is familiar, it's comfort. And in order to step outside of that struggle, that familiar place, you would have to want to be free. And if you want to be free, then you have to experience that freedom. And that freedom is unfamiliar, right? It's not because they're weak, because they're not. It's because change requires grieving the person they've always been. Okay, I've seen people stay in unhealthy relationships, dead end jobs, okay? Fear, anger, bitterness, because even dysfunction can become comfortable. I've seen people live this life, and you have too. If you've lived long enough, we've all seen it. The identity they've lived with for years begins to feel safer than the healing they're being introduced or invited to experience. Yeah. So when someone rejects your advice, right? When someone rejects your advice, if you're me and this has happened to you, when someone rejects your advice, they're not always rejecting you. Understand, overstand that. Sometimes they're protecting the identity they've learned to survive in, right? Yeah. Advice doesn't work without ownership. So let's talk about that because I've learned something as a coach. Advice only works when ownership exists. People rarely protect what they didn't build, they defend what they discover. That's why the divine asks questions, or when Christ walked the earth, he asked questions um, instead of giving answers. He was helping people arrive at the answers on their own. So he asked questions so that they can see, that they can experience, that they can build knowledge, build wisdom, strengthen the mindset, change the mindset. He asked questions and he allowed them to answer those questions. He allowed them to arrive. Listen, you can hand someone a blueprint, but until they decide they want to build this thing, the blueprint stays folded. The blueprint stays folded. So, this is where many helpers struggle, okay? This is where we struggle when we're setting boundaries, trying to set boundaries. This is the struggle because we hand them the blueprint and then it stays folded and we get frustrated. And so, with that, it's time to start setting boundaries. And this is where many of us struggle. We think boundaries are rejection, they're not. Boundaries simply define responsibility. Sometimes, love says yes. Sometimes love says, I can't do that for you, at least right now, or not today. And it's not because you don't care, because you do. We do. It's not that. Think about it this way. If, let's say, you have an adult child, because I do, I have adult children. Um, they're not children, they're adults. But if your adult child, okay, constantly ask for money, okay, they're adults. They should be responsible enough to earn their own money. But let's say they constantly ask for money and never changes their habits, the poor habits that's causing them to have to come to you for financial support. Ask yourself, why do you keep giving them money when you know that they need to be more responsible? Ask yourself, why are you doing that? Because I guarantee you, you'll come up with the answer. And I can't tell you what that answer is, only you know what that answer is. But I will say this, one of the biggest things would, for me, if that were me, would be the fear of them not having. But we have to understand and overstand that the reasons they don't have is because, and you ask that question like Christ did when he asked the question so that they can arrive with the answers. Why is it that you don't have any money? Why is it that your finances are always strained? We have to ask the hard questions and allow them the space to answer those questions. Because, see, giving more money isn't always love. Sometimes the most loving gift you can give is allowing reality to become the greatest teacher, their teacher. Okay? I'm just saying. We're talking about it, right? Yeah. Consequences. And with my friend, this was hard for me. I wanted to protect everybody, that's just me, being in my feminine energy. I want to protect people, and I want to protect everybody from pain. But here's what I learned. Some lessons only consequences can teach people. Only their consequences can teach them. You can't teach them that. They have to go through it to grow through it. If I keep removing every consequence that my friends and my loved ones have, I also remove the opportunity for them to grow. I take away their opportunity for growth. I'm doing that. That's hindering them, that's stagnating them. Let's go back to scripture. Proverbs 19:21. Many are the plans in a person's heart, in my heart, right? Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Father's, the Lord's purpose that prevails. You see, sometimes the divine's purpose unfolds through lessons we wish the people we love didn't have to experience. But it's not for us to decide what their experiences are going to be. That's not for us to decide. It's not. We may have good plans in our heart for them, but at the end of the day, the divine's purpose is going to prevail. So get yourself out of the way. Get yourself out of the way. Okay? I still speak truth. Speak. Speak the truth, but then release. I still speak truth. I still encourage. I still coach. I still plant seeds. But now I release them because I trust the divine more than I trust my own ability to convince someone. Okay. In some situations it worked, most it did not. Okay. It just wore me out. And those of you who know what I'm talking about, well, hey, you know. So release them. In the book of Ezekiel, the divine tells Ezekiel that his responsibility is to warn, not to force obedience. That goes for us. That's a rule. That's a law. To only warn, but not force obedience. Okay, that scripture changed the way I mentor. I'm responsible for speaking truth. I'm not responsible for someone else's response. How they respond to the truth. That's not my job, it's not my responsibility, it's not my role. It's not my concern how they respond. It's just my job to warn. It's just your job to warn. So today I want to leave you with this. Maybe you've been carrying your spouse, maybe your adult child, your siblings, your best friend. Maybe you've spent years trying to save someone who isn't ready to participate in their own rescue. Maybe that's you. Can I lovingly tell you something? Lovingly? I say it with love. Listen, put them back into the divine's hand. Put them back into the divine's hands. Not because you've stopped loving them, because you haven't, but because you do love them, because you've started trusting the divine. You can still pray, you can still encourage, you can still answer the phone if you feel you're strong enough to take that phone call. And if they ask for something that is not a burden, but a responsibility of theirs, if you're not strong enough to say no, then I'm not telling you what to do. You know what to do. Okay. Yeah. So you can still do it if you're strong enough. You can still show compassion, but you no longer have to carry what belongs to them. Okay. Love them. Plant the seed. Let them water it. Okay. And then trust the divine with the growth. I'll leave you with this question. Who have you been carrying that the divine has simply asked you to love? And think about that. Think about it. Journal about it. Pray about it. And maybe for the very first time, pick up your watering can and return to the garden that the divine trusted you with. Okay? Pick up your can and water your own garden. Because I'm pretty sure if you're like me, it's long, long, long overdue. Listen, thank you for spending this time with me. If this series blessed you, then share it with someone who has been carrying more than they were ever meant to carry. All right. Until next time, keep planting good seeds, keep watering your own garden, and remember your assignment is not to change people. Your assignment is to faithfully plant the seed and trust the divine with the harvest. Okay? This is Coach D. Jackson, and you've been listening to Watering the Seed, helping you find purpose through alignment. So together, we can all live a better way.